Jennifer Shaheen, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, John.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Rhode Island. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And we're going to have a really fun conversation today around customer and employee experience and the digital user experience. This is where all of your expertise comes into play. And I think it'll just be a lot of fun. Now, obviously, when we talk about customer experience, that can include a lot of things. Any end user, right? We can view as the customer of our product or service. And for the sake of this conversation, we're going to be talking about customers in terms of customer traditionally, but also internal customers to the organization in terms of the people, the employee experience, as well as the customer and consumer experience. And of course, on both ends, the digital user experience is so essential. And I think especially at this time during what people have called the Great Resignation, the Great Reevaluation, employees have options, and we need to enhance the employee experience and the user experience, especially as it connects with self-service, HR processes, and things like that. We have to make sure that's a really great experience for our people. Otherwise, they're only going to put up with it for so long, and then they're going to look for opportunities elsewhere where maybe they feel more valued, where it's an easier experience, where it's a more enjoyable experience. So that's what we're going to be exploring together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Jennifer's bio with everybody. Jennifer Shaheen is the e-marketing and technology therapist and is an expert at helping companies use technology to take advantage of effective marketing strategies and increase business productivity. Her businesses, the Technology Therapy Group, empowers small businesses to use technology to market their services and their products through software training, e-marketing, and web design. Through years of experience, Jennifer has developed an understanding of how technology can be used in practical business applications. Her techniques have boosted sales, enhanced staff productivity, and increased market share for her clients. What a tremendous background. It's a pleasure to be with you, Jennifer. Anything else you would like to share with my listeners by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in further?
Oh, sure. Thank you so much, John. Yes, I have been doing this a really long time and love it. I also sit on the board of Martin Guitars as well. So I sit on the other side of our conversation today, looking at things that will help grow and enhance relationships from, a high level organizational perspective. So I'm very excited to dive in.
Wonderful. Well, with that, why don't we just start with the framing up of your company, the e-marketing and technology therapist, and the Technology Therapy Group. I think that's a really fun name. How did you come up with that? And tell us just a little bit more about the origins of your business and what you're trying to accomplish.
Sure. So the company name actually evolved. I started the business my junior year at Hofstra University, and I was selling computers, and I sell through education. I didn't realize I did it. I would explain things. People started asking me if I could teach them at home. And so that evolved into my teaching people one-on-one at home, and then me saying, I need to learn a little bit more about this, and started doing some education and training for another organization as a contractor. And then it sort of evolved from there. So I think for me, at the core of who I am in technology, for me, has always been an opportunity for businesses to be more competitive, as long as they could get over some of the fears of using it. And that's where the education and training is, because like anything in life, right? The more we learn about it, the less afraid of it we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And, some people really embrace the technology, and we talk about generational differences and baby boomers, Gen X versus millennials and Gen Z, and aptitudes towards technological usage and whatnot. The bottom line is, regardless of kind of the stereotypes we might assign to certain generations or different groups of the population, everybody wants a good user experience, right? Everybody wants it to be simple, intuitive, and that they can just get stuff done that they want to without having to to deal with a lot of hassle and frustration along the way. So ultimately, regardless of who we're talking about, that's the goal. That's the end goal. That's what we want to try to accomplish. And that's why we talk about creating a really great customer experience, a really great user experience.
Yes. And when we talk about employees as well, employees are an opportunity for many businesses to make advocates internally. And so you do want people who are within your organization at every level to be as engaged with your business externally as if they were interacting with it as an audience member as well, because that helps with spreading message and also creating cultures, like what's happening inside the organization, exactly what we're putting outside the organization. So I really feel like it's just a 360 view all the way around.
Yeah, fantastic. And the therapy piece, I just think is fun, because people get a little bit anxious and uptight and angsty, when it comes to technology, sometimes, especially learning a new system, a new process. So helping people through that, I think is wonderful.
Yeah, the fun thing about that, John, is that came from I actually been written up in Newsweek and all over the world because I've done one-on-one coaching with C-suite executives in the early 2000s. And one of them turned to me and said, you're really much more like a therapist. I thought that was fun. And so that's where that came from, as I'm like, yes, I'm your technology therapist.
Yeah, wonderful. And I know with some of the work that you do, you do, in addition to the end user customer experience, you do also work with clients around the employee experience. And tell us a little bit more about some of what you do there and how your focus on customer experience and user experience in a digital age can really enhance things like attracting and retaining great employees and just helping people to be more productive.
So there's a couple of things in that conversation. Let's start with like inside out. So one of the things that I work a lot with organizations on and have throughout the years is when you're investing in technology, bringing the team members into the fold early on. It's interesting because we do this a lot with growing businesses, is outside contractors or individuals will decide the tone of the technology choices that get made, and then the individuals internal the organization just get told they have to use it, right? And so that becomes not a great user experience for the internal team members. Whereas if you're bringing on new technology into your organization, one of the things that we often coach growing businesses to understand is to bring on key team members to test it, to be part of the vetting process, because then you have advocates right there within an organization, especially because with technology, there's often changes, and it's not just the technology that's changing, it's often a process that might have to change. And it's funny because I'm actually preparing a presentation right now to do at a show later this month around this conversation as well, is because making decisions, needs to be done as a team so that buy-in is not only from the top, but all the way through the organizational team. And that can be from as simple as, like an advanced ERP system, or as simple as understanding how are we going to use our social media application for better posting, right? It can be so small to so large when it comes to technology and the team experience internally.
Yeah, and there really are so many different technologies that can be used for collaborations, for team collaborations. And I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit. What you might do to try to help teams to figure out what options might suit them best. Because I know one thing I get frustrated with is when I'm, I do consulting work, but I'm also a university professor, and that's my full-time gig. And over the last couple of years, we've really honed in on using Microsoft products and Microsoft Teams throughout the organization. So it's gotten better. But before that, we were using, we, every group, every working group, every committee was using some different software, some different way to connect and interact and share documents and whatnot. And it was so frustrating. Every time I was part of a new group working on a new project, I had to use some new system, and now I'm using and juggling like 10 different systems. So what would be your approach when talking with a client about how they might be able to streamline and get people so they're using something consistently, they're on the same page, they're not getting frustrated by using this plethora of different available systems out there?
Absolutely. And I love the example that you gave because, Teams is an all-inclusive great system. But what I like also about Microsoft, and they've done a really good job of this, is they also integrate well with other systems. So one of the first things that we advise when we're doing consulting on this side of it, again, it doesn't matter the size of your organization, is to really step back and look at like, what are the needs of your organization? And, understanding that you don't want to start with technology. You really have to start with understanding your needs, because what happens is it's like going to buy a car. You step in the car and all of a sudden you get, I see something cool in this car. And then you realize you're getting off track. So I always tell people, make your needs list before you start test driving any kind of software. Understand what might be software that you can't let go of. So you mentioned you work within the university. Sometimes there's something proprietary that has to work with something else. So usually it's impossible to get all things in one application. So it's important that, again, when you make that needs list, that you're very clear about, what we absolutely have to have in this one application. And then also, what do we need it to do to talk to other applications? And then the third thing here that I always like to look at is, what other problems is it helping you solve? Meaning, is it making people more efficient? Is it streamlining a process? Those are things that will also help with transition and change and buy-in, because instead of having to do 5 steps now, everybody, we're only going to have to do 2 because we've now set this up. Oh, so maybe they're going to have to learn something new, but we also want to show the benefits of this transition, and looking at the needs side before we add on the other piece, which is the wants side. Like, there's needs versus wants.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
I like
usually
that.
where I start.
Yeah, so being able to really clarify and articulate what those must-haves are, what you're already using, what is possible. I mean, the other aspect of this is we have contracts, right? And so sometimes you just have to deal with something that's not optimal, and wait to switch to something new until the contract runs out, or you have a particular functionality that only works within one system. So there's all of this that has to be negotiated, and that's why we have areas and organizations that focus on the technologies. If I'm a smaller firm and I'm trying to figure out, what might work best for me, and perhaps I'm reaching out to a firm like yours, walk me through what that would look like in terms of trying to optimize creating that really great employee experience and a digital user experience for my team, say of a smaller employee size of, maybe 50 employees or less.
Yeah. So actually, I think that's a really important point, is understand where you are today. So what do you have for team members today? And again, what do we want the technology to do for us today? And then I always tell people to look around 3 years down the road. And the reason I say that is, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, John, but this happens a lot because I've been in technology for so long. People get very emotional about technology. It's like they don't want to move out of the house. But I bring it up because, I deal a lot in retail. And what's really funny is if you outgrow a retail space, you often go down the road or find a different location and build it out. And we are less emotional about that shift than we are with changing technology. But again, you said small. The thing about small is we have to get out of this mentality that this solution that we pick today is going to be with us in 10 years, because it's okay. It's not. I think it's really important that we understand that you should outgrow things. And, but in choosing solutions, if your growth does allow for that, just make sure that you're choosing solutions that makes exiting easier for you in the future. So that's one of the things I do, because I find when we're small, we try and get everything in because we never want to switch technology. And it's a mind shift that I'm like really trying to get small businesses to understand is there's going to be cooler stuff in 5 years. You might want to grow out of it. Right?
Most likely you will. It's like you don't keep a cell phone for a decade, right? No, who does that?
I don't keep a cell phone past 2 years anymore.
Exactly. No, nobody does that. And it's because there's constant upgrades. And we're in a time of continual technological disruption. And so the systems that we were using 5 years ago, if we're still using them without upgrades, chances are it's not going to be serving us well today. And so we have to absolutely keep that in mind as we move forward and be looking for the opportunity to grow into new systems. And I get what people are hesitant and fearful of change, and people like to be comfortable with what they're doing and they don't want to learn new things. But if we can adopt, really a learning culture and a growth mindset around technology, that's going to serve us very well moving into the future of work. Because if we think it's been frustrating and things have changed a lot over the last decade, oh my goodness, in the next 5 years, next 10 years, what are we going to see? I mean, it's astronomical. I mean, what I predict will happen, in the next decade, it's not for the faint of heart. We have to just learn how to adopt and adapt and leverage the technologies that are going to help us to be most successful, to collaborate and be the most innovative, and ultimately that will allow us to leverage the collective creativity of our teams and be productive and efficient and successful. So that's what we have to focus on. And if we get stuck in, well, we've always used this system, this is what we know, you're going to be missing out.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because one of the things that I find so often is that we're not evaluating our processes if we're not changing. So this is not a technology conversation, but it is, right? Because process improvement makes us better all the way around. And I know that's one of like those, how you say to yourself, these are lessons I wish I had told myself when I started my business. I really wish I had understood that better. And now I know I'm constantly focused on improving our processes, but sometimes new technologies can shine a light on a new approach to doing something that didn't exist before. So by that light being shown on it, it may make us go, oh, wow, I never looked at something that way before. And now I can adjust or change accordingly. Another thing that I think is really important is companies that are ahead of us all, the big gorillas out there, as end users, consumers, we're using their tools. So your team is really being fed a lot more technology, because outside of the working environment, they're getting used to newer tools that almost the world is training them for you. As weird as that may sound, right? Because how many people could say, I didn't expect my dad to use voice to talk messages, or my dad texts. My dad is going to be 78 this year. So, I think about that. Like, this is a guy who, served in Vietnam. He ever thought of himself in his 20s, he'd never think he would do these things. But the outside world is educating our inside employees for us, no matter what age they are. And now it's raising the bar of expectations as well.
Yeah. And perhaps we can spend just a little bit of time talking to breaking down the resistance to change. That's a big topic, and we could spend a whole lot of time on it. And it really would, there's so much to talk about any change that happens in organizations, but specifically as it relates to technological change and digital user experience and employee experience. Any insights on how we can most effectively go about navigating that, breaking down the barriers to change and increasing the buy-in and the likelihood for adoption?
Absolutely. So I come from the old school technology world of, do you remember when you dialed into AOL and they used to say,
yeah. Yep.
Is your modem plugged in? And I would go through step by step. Okay. So when I think about that, I think that that's really almost in reverse. If we think of when we're going to change technologies in our organizations, we need to do them one at a time and not so many things at one time. I would say plan out incremental adjustments is very important, rather than, again, your big picture, your leadership, you're looking at multiple things coming down. But again, you're seeing things on a macro level, and the people who often work within your organizations, they're in their micro level. They're handling the tasks in the day-to-day. So throwing too many adjustments and changes at once can really be what causes anxiety. So that little example of, is the computer plugged in? It's the same thing. Is let's think about the technology innovations we have to roll out and plan out that we do maybe one a quarter versus, one a month, or some rolling out and adaptness to that. Because again, that's another piece that can be super helpful to buy-in is, I need a couple of months to get behind something. And this, John, right? When we're bringing on employees and we think about it, we give them time to train and learn their position before we start holding them accountable to certain metrics and deliverables. So we need to do the same thing with technology.
Yeah. Well said. Well, Jennifer, this has just been a fun conversation. We've only scratched the surface. I think there's a whole lot more we could talk about, but for today, I think we'll leave it there. Before we wrap up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Sure. So yes, please stop by technologytherapy.com. Also feel free to connect with me directly on LinkedIn, Jennifer Shaheen. Would love to chat with you on anything. And then I think probably I say the final word is what we were just discussing, which is, plan and grow together. And with that, I think you'll be successful from the inside out.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. It has been a pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Jennifer and her team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.